This will be definitely the most important part because you'll see that in a second. But this next part is one. Um, Let me say it this way: there are areas in the CISSP that will definitely be on every exam. There are those areas that we will, spend more time talking about them, and we will talk about cryptography, for example. We'll mention certain area, digital signatures and PKI and whatnot. The interaction between subject and object definitely will be in any exam. Security operation, disaster recovery, business continuity, and so on, definitely be on each exam, every exam. But one thing that no CISSP exam exists without is this next topic, which is the base of everything we want to do and know about being a security professional. So this next one is the base of risk management. Risk management is basically starts with risk assessment. We first want to know what our risk is. Okay, so in order for us to do that, there are certain variables that we need to cover and understand, fully understand, before we can say what is the right risk here. But at the end of the day, there is an objective behind analyzing the risk. The objective behind analyzing a risk is to take a look at the risk, look them in the eye, and say, I know risk is in this business environment. I understand the risk. I understand the consequences of not treating that risk. And here is what I'm going to do about it. Maybe I decide not to do anything about it because the risk is very low. Okay? And I can accept that. If there's a risk in that area, I'm not going to do anything about it now. Maybe I decide to purchase the cybersecurity insurance that will cover this area of the risk. This is something to do about it. Maybe I decide to go out on a shopping spree of super cool cyber technologies today that will potentially minimize the risk in that area. But one thing that I will never do is I will never ignore the risk. Ignoring the risk means that I know that I have a super important asset in a certain area of the business. And when I choose not to test it, not to go out and map and analyze the cybersecurity risks related to that asset, that means ignoring the risk. Okay? I can do avoiding the risk. That the risk means choose not to work in that environment yet because the risk is too high for me. Okay? But avoiding the risk, taking my business elsewhere, is not ignoring the risk. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Ignoring the risk is one thing that can lead to negligence. The base of it is negligence. And this is something we don't want to ever be in. So the purpose of analyzing the risks will lead us to being able to manage our risks and decide on what to do with them in order for us to avoid negligence. Okay, that these three can connect to you, right? Can you connect them? Um, Again, analyze the risks so you can manage them and you can avoid negligence. All right, that's what we do. And that's the most important part of the CISSP. Without it, without fully understanding and being in control of this area of the CISSP, I highly recommend not taking the CISSP exam yet. So only when you score 85, 80, 85 and above for that area, only then you register for the CISSP. Do not register before that, okay? Because they can put this in almost every question of the CISSP. They want to know that you are executive enough in your state of mind to think about risk management, okay? That's the topic. Businesses always care about businesses. Businesses want to live. They want to thrive. They want to grow. If a business doesn't grow, it shrinks. There's no middle ground. There's no pause. There's no cruising altitude for businesses. It's either this or this, okay? It's either they grow or they go down, they shrink. So by understanding this, we understand that the business constantly have new initiatives in place. They constantly look for the next challenge, the next growth mechanism, okay? Since they are looking for the next growth mechanism, what does it mean to us, security people?
More risks.
More risks, yeah. More potentially expanding the what? What did we call that?
Attack surface, the
The
exposure.
attack surface, perfect, perfect. Yes, use that language, okay? We are expanding the attack surface. We acquire another company that is in the retail business and we're in finance. So now we inherit the risks that are brought in from this company, okay? We invest in penetrating the EU market now, or not. We work in the EU and we want to target the Australian market now. Awesome. It's great news, right? But the more we take on us, now in Australia, there's a Privacy Act of Australia. We need to be aware of that. We need to look at the business and say, for cybersecurity, these are the consequences, these are the risks. So everything we're going to talk about from here and on is about that, okay? The business grows, it brings more risks, the attack surface expands, and we need to manage the risks. We need to assess those risks, analyze those risks, manage them to avoid negligence. Great, good? All right, let's do this. This one is your next whiteboard. Mark it as whiteboard, right? You need to memorize this risk formula. As you walk into your CISSP exam, this will be one of the first things you put on the whiteboard. Why? Because all risk management questions can come down to this. I will risk it and even say that any question of the CISSP can be brought to this one slide. If I'm to choose one slide that will represent everything that I know about CISSP, this will be it. Because questions can start with impact or probability. They can start with the threat inside the probability. They can start with the risk and talk about risk materialization, and I need to figure out now the probability and impact. They can talk about quantitative impact, which means a quantitative risk. And this is something we will practice soon enough today. They can talk about the need for physical controls with the absence of those controls in that risk environment. And I will need to figure out the risk itself and how those controls can minimize the vulnerability or can close part of the vulnerabilities and then minimize the probability, hence minimize the risk level. You see where I'm going with this? Every question of the CISSP can be brought to this one slide and the risk formula. What it says is very simple. Every risk is built of two variables, two components. impact on one side and probability on the other. If you want to quantify them, we multiply impact and probability, and that's how we get to the risk level. Okay? So impact is high, probability is high, my risk is high, right? Right. If my impact is high and probability low, then risk is probably medium, right?
Medium.
Right. If my impact is high and my probability is medium, then my risk is
Medium.
we don't know. Because sometimes organizations will decide, oh, if the probability is medium, then for us, it's a medium risk. Only if probability is high, then the risk can get too high. What this is called risk appetite. Each organization describes for its own, and they set their own risk appetite. Okay, so there's no one truth for everyone. Don't look for it in your exam. Okay, unless they tell you risk impact times probability is always this on this level. So they give you a chart, but they most likely won't do that. Okay, so you need to bear in mind that there's this transparent or I'll call it dark matter, right? The stuff that between the stars, the dark matter in space. This is the risk appetite. It defines the approach to risk management of the organization, right? And always, your questions on risk will always come down to controls, okay? Your controls will help you minimize the vulnerability, okay? By minimizing the vulnerability, you're pretty much closing the window that this thief has to enter your house. Now, instead of having this wide window, you now have this wide. See what I'm saying? If this is the width of the window, that thief will need to put a lot more effort to enter your house. And even if they succeeded in entering your house, you now have a dog, you have an alarm system, and you have patrol coming in and looking at your door once the alarm system goes off. Okay, so you have controls to mitigate the risks. Okay, by doing this, by minimizing the window of opportunity for the threat, we bring the probability down. Do you see that? Low probability means that no matter what the impact is, the impact can be critical. Okay? Any impact on the organization can be critical, but if the probability is as low as possible, then this risk can now be tolerated, right? We can live with it. Even if doomsday happens and this risk get materialized, I know that the chances of this are so low that I'm probably gonna divert my budget to something else. I'm gonna do something else. I'm not gonna spend time on this. I'm not gonna spend money and resources on this because this is a low risk. However, once I identify the risk and all components of the risk, I need to monitor it. I need to make sure it doesn't change drastically, dramatically, in such way that I cannot control it anymore. This is much like the management of COVID-19 incident. I call it incident. It takes more than a year, but it's still an incident. It happened. So the way to manage the risk of increased infection, the government monitors certain populations, certain areas of the country, right? They monitor them. They sleep with one eye open and they look at those areas, and if they see an anomaly, they immediately go out there and target that risk to bring it back to down, back to normal, back to risk that they can tolerate, risk that they can accept. Make sense, all this language?
So reasonable risk.
Yep, to reasonable level. Yes, exactly. Is this language clear to everyone? Yep. Anything that is not clear, anything that is not, does not make sense to you, this is the time to ask. And this is super important for me that you'll understand the start point on this discussion. Okay, good. To manage your risks, you know, it's basically asking the question, what is the cost and what is the benefit? Okay, if I'm going to implement this and that technology or control set of controls here and there, it's going to cost me that much. What do I benefit from it? If I spend $1 million here, what do I benefit from it? Do I mitigate a $500,000, $50,000 worth of risk, maybe $10,000? It doesn't make sense to benefit less than the cost, right? So if I spend $1 million, I want to benefit at least 1,000,001, right? Make sense? Right? Bear with me, guys. I need your reactions because I need to know that you're with me. Okay? I can run on this, but I don't want to because this is super important. All right? Alan. Alan,
I unmuted myself because Henas, okay.
I have a question actually.
Sure, Shachar, go ahead.
How do you quantify the risk?
We'll get to that in 2 minutes. This is a good question. We have a formula for this.
Okay.
Anybody else? Ask away. Ask those questions. I want to answer all your questions here. Okay. So again, cost and benefit, okay? I want to know that if I spend that much money, I'm gaining more than what I spent on. This makes sense. This makes business sense. What do we protect when we do risk management? At the end of every risk, we have an asset. Okay? There's no risk without asset, right? The asset has to be there. Whether we talk about network, whether we talk about a certain server, host, and maybe we cannot identify just that server, so we identify the application. And the deeper we go, the closer we are to a more targeted asset. If we can target and aim to protecting the information or the specific data on a certain application, in a certain host, in a certain network, that'll be the best. But sometimes we don't know. We don't know where the data is. So what management sometimes say, I want you, the CISSP, to protect everything in the network, right? It sounds legit, but how feasible is that? How achievable is that? Probably not so achievable, right? If management says, go ahead and protect everything, that's not a good saying. What we need to educate management with is to show them the path to our holy grail. So identify our critical assets, again, within a network, within a host, within the application, to get to that crystal ball, that crown jewel, okay, that we want to maintain highest level of security. And then on that asset, we ask, what will be the impact if that asset is unavailable? So availability controls. What will be the asset of that data if it was breached? So confidentiality control. And what will be the impact if that data was altered by an unauthorized subject or unauthorized party? So that will the integrity controls. Okay, so C, I, and A. And when we do cover our assets, yeah, See the game that I played there with the words, cover your assets. My God, guys, you are so serious. What happened? Thank you. So cover your assets. Ask yourself, what could happen? What could happen is our risk scenario. Okay? Is it really going to happen? What is the probability or likelihood behind this? And if it happens, how bad will it get? Okay, how bad will it get is the impact. Impact, we want to know. Quantitative, qualitative, maybe both, I don't know. And then, what can we do to make it better? The first three painted a bad picture for me, right? I have a risk scenario. This is a high probability. This is a super high impact. Okay, my question is, can we do something about it? If the answer is no, then what do we do? Let me give you an example. In Israel, we have a certain area called Bet Shean, Emek Bet Shean. Okay, that's the name of the area. It's on the how do you call the Shever Sur Africain? Guys, Israel?
The Israeli African fault line or something.
Okay, thank you, Shachar.
Mediterranean
So
fault
it's an area of tectonic movement. Okay, it's an area of tectonic movement, and Emek Bet Shean stands right there on the two tectonic plates. Okay, so once every 100 years, Israel experienced an earthquake in that area. Emek Bet Shean is right there. Okay, last earthquake, serious earthquake Israel experienced was 110 years ago. Okay, so we're long overdue. You see where this is going, right? So businesses in Emek Bet Shean, they have businesses there. They don't have high rise, they don't have skyscrapers there, but they do have some buildings there. They know that the probability for an earthquake is very high. They know that given a certain level of earthquake, the impact is going to be very high. Right? What can they do about it?
Nothing.
Make an insurance.
Yeah, they can take
Okay. If you're the insurance company, Carlo, would you insure this building or this company?
Yes, but
Would you?
depends.
Depends on what? It depends on what?
The probability, how often does it happen? When was the last time? Then we could play with the participants.
I give you all the information. Rift Valley, thank you. Rift Valley, Aaron, thank you.
So I would do a risk assessment, and based on that, determine the additional cost that they'd have to pay for insurance. Because at some point, I'd have to pay it out.
So Valentino says, no, I'm not going to insure them.
No, I will insure them.
Oh, you will insure them.
At an additional prime. So
yeah,
in order to make back
prime.
if I had to lose something. So there's a reasonable risk in that.
So most likely those companies, they have choice. They will say, I'm not interested in insuring you. I'll take my risks elsewhere.
It depends on the actuarial rate,
It depends on?
It depends on the actuarial rate of the estimation of the values and the probability of the loss.
Let's say that a company that develops a software that is worth $1 billion sits right there. Their servers are right there. Everything is on-prem. All the personnel is local, and they develop a software of $1 billion. The insurance company will have a big challenge facing them as an insurance, but it's interesting that you guys picked just the insurance as a way to mitigate the risk, while we have many other ways to mitigate the risk.
But you can, for example, make all the buildings earthquake proof. But
there you go.
Again, it's cost benefit. If it's cost more than insuring the houses, then
there you go.
We
In
can
Japan,
move just the
they
data
build
center.
sky rises, right? In Japan, they build sky rises that are earthquake resistant. They're built in such a way that they will stand any earthquake level that we know of. They can spend $100 million to mitigate the $1 billion risk. They can probably do something easier, which is move to the cloud and not risk that asset, okay? Just have your data on the cloud. They can probably have a redundancy site, a disaster recovery site elsewhere from Emek Bet Shean. You see where I'm going with this, okay? But if they don't, they're not able to do anything of these. They're not able to build a new building. No insurance no insurance company wants to insure them, and they cannot move to the cloud due to confidentiality requirements that they have. The fact is that at some point they will need to decide on that risk, and probably someone will need to make a decision to probably accept the risk. Say, that is it. You know, we live on the edge. You know, much like the things that I say to my students, you know, and also my kids. Life is a dangerous thing. You can die from it. So you know, we need to choose. Thank you, Carlo, for this little smile there. At least you listen. Or maybe I'm not that funny anymore. I don't know.
You are. You are.
Oh, thank you. So again, what can we do about it is the question, the $1 million or $1 billion question. What can we do about it is the controls, okay? And that's where we want to be. After all this devastating picture that we just drew, we want to get to the bottom line of, okay, what do I need to do about this? Well, you can't do anything. Okay, let's live with it. Or we can do this, and that. These are the options. Okay, let's choose one of them, maybe two of them. Okay, and that's where we want to be as CISSP. We want to give the business options. Now, let's look at the different variables. And this is kind of a repetition of what we already said. Threats, by their definition, are always out of your control. You cannot control threats. Don't waste your time, money, and resources on trying to control hackers or trying to control the earthquake. This is a given. It will always be there, okay? It just needs to find the loophole in your security to exploit a vulnerability. So for threat identification, we want to run threat assessment. We want to be able to say, okay, what are the threats? We want to go to a third party. We want to go to threat analysis or threat intelligence. We want, excuse me, someone to look at the darknet and look for us on the darknet and to say, hey, this is GCP. You should prepare for this and that and da 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 da. Okay, November is the shopping month in the world, retail. Okay, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for GCP? This is the threat assessment. It doesn't give me the exploitation itself, but it gives me a map of my threats. Vulnerabilities, on the other hand, are always under your control. Even if you're not familiar with them, vulnerabilities are always under your control. And what I'm referring to by vulnerabilities that you don't know of is this, the 0-day vulnerabilities, okay? 0 days are a fact of technologies today. There are vulnerabilities that hackers know of and the vendors don't know of. And us, the security professionals, we don't know of. That's what we call it 0 days, okay? So it's 0 days vulnerability from publication, from detection, okay? That's how we treat them. And even though they're not known to us yet, they exist. That's why we constantly operate under the assumption that we have an open window, okay? And that brings me back to the layered security and defense in depth. So if you get a question in your CISSP, what can we do against 0 day? Okay, a 0 day is not a code, it's not a malware. 0 day is the fact that you have a vulnerability that you're not aware of. And the best way to deal with 0-day is to have layered security or defense in depth. All right, we good? Yeah, all right.
Yep.
Exploitation is, again, it's not a code. To exploit is an act, an action. Threat will exploit a vulnerability. You see the connection between them. And I repeat what I said before, okay? The threat exploits a vulnerability. So exploitation is the action that a threat will take on a vulnerability. All right? And we want to be able to control this exploitation through the controls that we put in place. However, if exploitation takes place, none of the controls is important now. What is important is the level of impact that we are about to encounter from this connection between a threat and vulnerability. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. Going back to probability and likelihood, and I mentioned that before, probability and likelihood are the same, okay? Don't a-holes from ISC mess with your mind, okay? Don't let them confuse you. When they say likelihood, they refer to probability and vice versa. Probability or likelihood are based on a few questions that you can ask yourself. How easy it is to exploit that vulnerability. How motivated the threat is to exploit my vulnerability. How capable are they, and so on and so forth. So those questions that we ask are really asking about the connection between the threat and the vulnerability. The level of exploitation that we can expect from that threat against that vulnerability. All right, guys? All right, cool. The impact as we look at it, is either system impact or data impact. System focused or data focused. What we can say about the impact is that no matter if it's system or database or system or data focused, the impact itself is given to us by the business. We do not set the impact. We, CISSPs, we do not say in your questions, you don't set the impact. You don't say this is high impact, this is low impact. This needs to come from the business. That's why in scenario-based questions, you need to understand the impact that was set by the business and not rank it yourself. Okay? So you need to look at the question and say, okay, I think what I'm reading here through the description of the question is that we're talking about a high impact or medium impact. Okay? You will get that from the business. You cannot decide on it on your own. All right? Make sense? Good, good. Ownership of the risk is the same ownership of the assets, the same ownership of the data, system, okay, business process.
Is there an impact? You talk about system impact and data impact. If, for example, the impact is losing money, is it? Oh, it's not an impact actually. I mean,
No. Look at the definition again. I went back to that slide. The impact can be quantifiable, money, or quality. Okay, so value, high, medium, low.
okay.
But the impact source can be system focused. So my exchange is down, okay? Or data focused, my exchange database is leaked.
Okay.
The source of the impact is either system or data.
It can be also both.
It can be both, absolutely. Yeah. And that's by the way, doomsday, right?
I don't know. What I think about is a hacker broke into a bank system and took out money.
Yeah.
Okay? Transfer money from one account to another account.
Right.
The systems are still up. Okay?
Mhm.
The data is still there. Okay? But the money is missing.
Right.
So is it system-focused impact, data-focused impact?
No. Again, sorry, I was about to say Otam, which is in Hebrew again. The source of the impact, the thing that the hackers touch, in order to get to that quantifiable, qualifiable impact, is either system or data, and definitely can be both, right? So that's the area that I want to protect in order to avoid that huge impact. Okay, I can protect data and I can protect the system. If I understand the source of the impact, I can probably control the level of the impact. Maybe they can steal some of our database, but not all database, simply because it's segmented database and encrypted differently. Make sense?
Okay.
All right, cool. So the risk ownership talks about the owner of the risk, owner of the asset. It's all the same thing. And we want to make sure that we know who the owner is. Okay? Being the risk owner means that you have big burden on your shoulders to convince us, to convince the organization that this is the right way to deal with the risk. Okay? It's not given to anyone in the organization. They need to first understand the role of a risk ownership or risk owner and then agree to it. All right? Let's take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we go through quantitative and qualitative risk analysis following your question, Shachar. How do we quantify risk in numbers? And this will be another topic, part of the big one, the risk analysis. So 4:10 your time, so that gives us 11 minutes. We'll be back here and we'll cover the last part of today's. And I want you guys to prepare yourself for tonight. After we're done with this, you need to practice domain 1 question like crazy. This is your part, okay? I'm not just saying it, I mean it, okay? I want to see dozens of questions done by you between now and tomorrow morning, right? Okay, cool. So will we convene here?
The class marker or in the book?
Class marker. No. Class marker, because I see the statistics and I can prepare tomorrow morning, okay? We work together here, all right?
Okay.
You do your part, I do my part, and I correct tomorrow morning, or I direct tomorrow morning again. So 10 minutes, we'll reconvene here again, all right? All right,
Okay.
see you in 10.